Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Vitalogy. Now, that's a little different. Ryan, I want to say welcome to you. And I want to say
Josh.
welcome to everybody here. And if you'll see the sign above me, if you're watching us, it says Vitalogy Podcast. You know, I had this interesting conversation, Ryan. I haven't filled him in on this at all yet. I was explaining the podcast. And actually, the way it worked is one of you out there who may be joining us and listening on some platform, said, so now explain to me this thing about the podcast, because I've heard it's on YouTube. I've heard it's on Facebook. But then you call it a podcast.
Yeah.
And so I said, well,
Sure.
Yeah, of course. Why not? That makes sense. And so she says to me, that means it's not a podcast. And I said, okay, now that's not true. It doesn't mean that it's not a podcast. It's just that the what we do live here gets put onto a podcast.
You can get it on the podcast store.
You can get it on. So, okay, here's my thought. I thought this just needs to be called Vitalogy.
There you go.
Because it's the study of life. And it, you can join and listen to it as a podcast. But you can join here and interact with us live.
We hope you do.
Which we love. We love it when you do. But I've found that actually the majority of our viewers are actually watching on YouTube or on Facebook. Not necessarily live, but they're diving in,
listening on the
podcast. On the podcast, exactly. Or on the podcast. And the beauty of those other options is that they can listen to it at double speed.
There you go. There you go.
No, but we'd love it if you can. I know the timing. We record this at 3:00 on Wednesdays, and so that doesn't work for everybody.
It does not,
but it does for us.
Yep.
And so, but we're glad that you are enjoying this and joining in any way you can. And so,
if you're live, give us a shout out,
Yes.
comment in the comment section, say hi. We'd love to know who's tuning in.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, we'll do our best to get to them.
That's right. That's right.
We've got a lot to cover today.
We
Josh.
really do, man. This is going to be a fun one. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is episode 34 of Vitalogy. And actually it's taken me 34 episodes to realize that whole thing that I just explained to you about what this really is. But in episode 33, you'll see, if you're seeing on the podcast, or if you look on our YouTube page, you'll see that that there was a spiritual warfare seminar that happened last week. If you were sitting around at 3:00 last week on Wednesday thinking, where are they? Well, we were here preparing for the spiritual warfare seminar.
Yeah.
And so that kind of took the place of the podcast, but it's in the podcast feed. And so if you're listening on our podcast, you can go back and listen to that, or you can go to our YouTube page and find the spiritual warfare seminar.
Yeah.
And so we're going to pause right now and let you go and do that. Okay. Just kidding.
Wonderful.
Good. Glad you're back. All right. So hopefully you got to hear this seminar, and that's not one you want to listen to at double speed. In fact,
maybe not.
I would highly recommend listening to that one at normal speed or less than, and really thinking through, because there is a lot of great content. Ryan, I thought it was it was a fabulous seminar.
Thanks. I got home, and this is in advocacy of single speed. I got home, and my wife Kelly said, that was a lot. So it really was I don't know, 10 hours worth of material that I condensed into about an hour and 15 minutes unapologetically, because that's sort of the platform and the way that we decided to do it. But I would have loved to have dove into each one of the things I talked about in greater depth.
A little more depth.
It is what it is.
And by the way, that was the first time that we've done a seminar as a part of our growth track. Okay. That's our third Wednesday of the month. We're doing seminars. And that's the first time we've done that. And so we are kind of trying to figure out what that is.
Yeah. What the best way to do it is.
How much content to give it one time. And so, but I mean, all of Ryan's slides are on the in the YouTube description comments are in the description, and you can find those as well, so you can kind of watch alongside of it and go nice and slowly through. But one of the things that the limit of time that we have just didn't give us much time to get to questions and answers.
Oh yeah, so we get to do some of that today.
We get to do some of that, yes. And so we're gonna dive right in because we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, let's do it.
And so, hey, everybody saying hi online here. What's up, Michael? And great message last Sunday, by the way. Which, okay, thank you for that reminder. We'll do our best to get to that as well, because you wrapped up our sermon series on "This Is Us" with a sermon on "We Are Servants."
Yes,
which was, as Michael says, was fabulous. So let's dive into some of these questions though from last Wednesday. All right, let's just start off. We had people kind of voting on which questions to ask, and the top question was this: is there any difference in the access the enemy has to a believer's mind versus that of an unbeliever? That question.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Because I think here's what they're wrestling with. I made the comment that a believer cannot be possessed by a demonic power or force, but they can be oppressed by one. They can be demonized by one. And but that's more about ownership than it is about and full access than it is about even some partial access. So and he's talking about the mind here. So or this person who asked this question is. So my answer to that would be yes and no.
Yes and no.
All right.
Okay.
So
all right.
here, let me read the question again. Is there a difference in the access the enemy has to a believer's mind versus that of an unbeliever? No, but there is a difference in access the believer has to truth that they're then able to combat demonic lies that the enemy wants to feed them. So if the enemy were unable to have access to the mind of a believer, then some of the things that scripture calls us to do would be they wouldn't be necessary. I'm thinking specifically of 2 Corinthians chapter 10 verses 3-5, but the climactic point is in verse 5 when Paul says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ.
Yeah.
Right. So if the enemy didn't have access to the mind of the believer, then we wouldn't have any reason to take every thought captive. It would already be captive to Christ. It would already be owned completely and totally by Christ. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
We do have different access to truth, though. Okay.
So that's definitely different.
Yeah.
And there's definitely, so what you're saying is that we have to take it captive because the enemy does have some sort of access.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is it the same?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. I don't know if we have clear scriptural chapter and verse on that. I would say it's similar.
Okay.
It's similar. But the Holy Spirit, the difference would be, can we be possessed and or owned by demonic forces and powers? And I would say absolutely not.
Okay.
Now, their question was specifically about the mind. And my gut response would be, there is no difference in the way that the enemy attacks the mind of the unbeliever than the way that he attacks the mind of the believer.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. So now then the next, it's a related question that to this is this one. I'm gonna put on the screen here. If someone was possessed, would they know it?
See, that is such a fascinating question.
It really is.
Because in scripture, I'm trying to think of different examples, right? Most of the time when somebody is possessed, other people know it, but we're not sure. We don't see them affirming knowledge of the possession. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's clear to other people, right? I'm thinking about the boy who's possessed by a demon. It throws him into fires, right? And it really is tormenting his life. But we don't have knowledge that he's going, hey, I'm possessed by a demon here. Help. I think that they're so encompassed by the demonic activity and they view it as reality that I don't know that they know. In fact, my response would be, I don't think they know. I think other people can see it. What do you think?
It's a great question. I mean, I do think that it's probably one of those things they know after the fact.
Yeah.
So that you could see in retrospect only, but in the
Yes.
moment, just like, I mean, in some ways, just like all sin that we're involved in, that is a part of our life. um the problem often is that we don't recognize it.
Yeah.
We don't see that we've been trapped by it until you kind of get to stand back and look backwards at it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Now, I would say my answer would be different if they had asked if someone was demonized or
yeah.
oppressed by a demon or attacked by a demon, that would they know? My answer to that would be yes.
Okay.
So I would think so, especially if that person is a follower of Jesus. I think
Mhm.
they would know. Um, but the question was, if someone is possessed,
Yeah.
would they know?
Now, this we got into a little bit in the seminar, but in fact, I think you said you chose not to use the word possessed, right?
Correct.
Because that's got some different connotations to
Mhm.
it. Now, if you had to explain the difference between possessed
Yeah.
and demonized,
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the spot now because I
Yeah.
think, but what would you say?
Yeah, I would say possessed would be owned in the sense that
Mm,
they can in some way control. I think back, right, I'll use this example again, to the boy who's had demons and they were throwing him
mhm,
into fires. I think of the man who was possessed by demons and had lacerations
mhm,
all over him,
mhm,
right? So
mhm.
there's some sort of control and ownership that a demon would exert over somebody who's quote unquote possessed. Now, demonized, I would say that that's different,
Yeah.
that there is attack, but not ownership.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's where, and oftentimes through mind, through heart, like, so demonic attack could come through depression, it could come through anxiety, it could
Mhm,
come through a number of different areas,
mhm.
suicidal ideation. Now, just to be clear, just like I said in the seminar, I'm not saying that anytime those things happen, it's demonic attack, but
Not all the time. Is
correct.
that how those things
Correct.
happens? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
I got it.
But that those are ways that somebody can be attacked but not possessed.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
So because that's an important distinction because as a Christian, I mean, I'll put it in a question that I think this question is begging. Um, can a can a Christian be possessed?
I would say no.
Okay,
I would say no.
but can a Christian be demonized?
Yes.
See, there you go.
Absolutely.
That's huge,
Yeah.
and that distinction is big. In
Yeah.
other words, that a Christian can be attacked by a demon,
Yeah, sure.
all sorts of these
Absolutely.
things.
And I think even repeatedly so, right? So
Hmm.
the the user experience in a sense,
Hmm.
right? Could feel similar to somebody
Yeah,
it could feel like possession if it's continual
yeah,
attack,
absolutely.
but there's still an ownership that the Holy Spirit would have on the life of the believer, that the Spirit lives inside of you,
Hmm.
makes his home in you,
Hmm.
and isn't going to give up ownership of you. You're sealed for the day of redemption, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I would say no, you can't be owned by and two things, right?
Mhm, mhm.
You can be attacked, certainly. And I think we see examples of that in
Yeah,
scripture.
yeah, absolutely. Man, well, that gets me to, we're kinda playing with these ideas well, playing with these ideas, we mentioned these ideas of demons.
Mhm.
Now, and one of the, I think, really interesting things that could have been its own seminar was the talk about Elohim, right?
Oh, yeah.
And about the gods, okay? So,
Right.
I'm gonna jump around a little bit and out of the order of the questions that y'all voted on, just
Yeah.
because this relates to this really well.
Yeah.
And here's the question that came up: is what is this hierarchy of spiritual powers, if there is one? Okay, because it seems like you mentioned gods. Yeah, or God. Okay, that's it. Capital G, gods, lowercase g, devils, the devil, spirits, demons. I don't know if there are any others. Well, Elohim,
Elohim.
but that's I guess gods.
Yeah. Can I just give a quick synopsis of what we talked
Yes,
about?
let's. Yeah,
So
that's
this
probably a good
first
idea.
word, the first time we read the word God in the scriptures is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created. And that word is Elohim.
Yeah.
And Elohim, you have to imagine that Elohim is a title. It's not a name, right? So it would be like calling you dad instead of calling you Josh, or calling you pastor instead of calling you Josh, right? So there's a very, well, and that word Elohim is used in a variety of different ways in the scriptures. And so context matters when we're talking about Elohim, because a very astute reader of the scriptures and or person who's interacting with an Elohim would say, which one? Right? Because there is not just one Elohim. So here's the, and you can argue with that, but you'd be wrong, because here's what the scriptures, there are at least 6 different ways the scriptures use this term Elohim. One is in direct reference to Yahweh. Who I would argue is the chief creator God. He is the creator of everything in addition to the other Elohims.
Okay. And so what we're saying is that in Genesis, when it uses the general term, that's actually, it's referring to Yahweh, though.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It is referring to Yahweh.
Yeah. Which makes sense. In fact, interesting. In Genesis 1 and 2, there's no personal names of anyone.
No.
Even Adam is not a personal name. That's not the guy's name. It's just man, right?
Human.
And then
human is life.
Exactly.
Right.
So, interesting.
So Elohim. All right. I would say that Elohim is a generic term for a spiritual being that has very real spiritual power. Okay. So Yahweh is an Elohim. Members of Yahweh's divine council are referred to as Elohim. This is in Psalm 82. Foreign gods are referred to as Elohim. Demons are referred to as Elohim. Spirits are referred to as Elohim. And angels are referred to as Elohim. All of them are spiritual beings that have very real spiritual power.
Okay.
And so Yahweh in the hierarchy, Yahweh is above it all, right? He is the creator God who called all of this, spoke all of this around us, but also the created order of the other spiritual powers into being. Now, I would say that, and I'm sort of smiling because some of this is a little bit conjecture and you have to tease some of this out, but I would say that all of those were originally created good, and those Elohim, that they were designed to serve the purposes of Yahweh, and that a third of them rejected God and have gone rogue, as it were, and are intent on destroying the goodness of God's creation. And so we would consider them to be evil Elohim, or demons, or there's a number of different terms, devils. And I would simply say in the hierarchy of rogue Elohim who have gone against their creator, they were designed to serve him, they've gone against him, that the Satan or the devil or the serpent in Genesis chapter 3, all the names that he goes by in scripture, is the chief Elohim of the evil armies of darkness. And if this sounds like a science fiction novel, well, so be it.
Well, and it does seem, it seems like there's other named demons,
no doubt,
that may be of some level of, in that hierarchy above other demons.
Yeah,
maybe,
absolutely.
right?
Listen, when we read through, it's funny because when we read through the 10 Commandments, right? And there, you shall have no other gods before me. The only reason Yahweh gives that command to his people is because it's a very real option. And if you go back and you read Exodus chapter 3, when Moses asks Yahweh, he doesn't know his name's Yahweh at the time. He asks this Elohim who's speaking to him, who should I say sent me? And what God doesn't respond with is say God sent you, right? Because their response would have been, which one? And so he says, tell them Yahweh sent you. And as if to say, this is not a title, this is my name. And by the way, I'm the creator God, and let me prove my authority and power over the other gods that the Egyptians are worshiping by all of these signs and
Yeah.
plagues, and eventually by freeing you so that you can come and worship me. That's
right.
the point of Exodus and freedom from the captivity in Egypt, is so that they can go worship God.
Yeah. I've heard it said that each of the plagues are a direct, like claiming that Yahweh has power over each of the gods
Totally.
of Egypt, right?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, it's powerful.
So that's sort of a brief. Yeah, the scriptures often use a generic term, Elohim, when we use specific terms, right? Spirits, angels, demons. But in the Old Testament, oftentimes those are referred to as Elohim.
Yeah. Nice.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, someone asked if there's a lowercase gods and demons. And so, yeah, you kind of answering that question.
Yeah.
There are.
And you know, going back to the 10 Commandments, the second commandment would be don't make a graven image, right? And we sometimes conflate those two, right? Don't have any other gods and don't make idols, as if to say, like, in Western thought, we're very comfortable with idols, right? But we would go, they don't have any real power. They're just a stone, right? So this is, in many ways, this is Isaiah 44, I think it is, where God is saying, right, to Isaiah, how silly idolatry is. Like you take a piece of wood but with half of it, you carve it into an idol and you bow down and worship it. And the other half you throw into the fire and you burn, right? So in some ways the scriptures go idols, like just silly. But and Paul in 1 Corinthians, which we'll get the chance to talk about next year. We're doing a 1 Corinthians series. He says an idol is nothing, but be careful, because sometimes there could be a demon behind it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there's this tension, right? Between the first commandment, don't have any other gods before me, and don't create a carven image, a graven image. And my goodness, sometimes those are tied together in a very unique way. Yeah. So sometimes it's just a meaningless piece of nothing. Yeah. And yet there's something, I mean, there's a danger of there being a demon there that in other words, I mean, we've got to watch out for demons. That's wow. Okay. And I think there would be so many people who operate in these spheres far more consistently than I do that would say absolutely. Like when you practice the occult or other sort of expressions of spirituality that don't acknowledge Jesus as Lord, you open yourself up to these very real and very powerful demonic activity. There's just things that open you up to being attacked, demonized, however you want to put it. And I think Paul's simply just hitting on that in 1 Corinthians. Okay. We're going to save that thought. If that brings up questions in your mind about how that could be, we're going to get to some questions about that. But before I leave this topic, you'd mentioned that, a third of the angels, right? Yeah. Have left. So someone asked this, how is it that legions of angels left God? And really this is kind of a question now that we're going to just solve all the free will questions in life right now. But can either angels or a demon change their mind? Okay, so how is it that we would just call this the Great Rebellion in heaven? Yeah. If I would have known that this question was coming, I'd have my citations better down. But I want to say it's Ezekiel 19 and Isaiah 14. Ezekiel. Good. Ezekiel 11, somewhere in there. It's either 11 or 19. That talk about the rebellion of the Satan. Doesn't use those terms, but would use the terms of the Prince of Tyre. Is that right? In Isaiah, I believe. I want to say it's Isaiah 14. So I could be wrong on that. So that's where we get these ideas from. Revelation chapter 12 would be another place that talks about the fall of Satan and the way that a third of heaven follows after him. And essentially, the original sin was a longing to be God, a longing to be beautiful and to be worshiped and to be the one at the center of the story. So specifically, the question is, can either angels or demons change their mind? And I would say no. I would say no. And let me give you part of the reason for my answer. There's a passage in, I believe it's 2 Peter, that talks about the goodness of the gospel and the way that the angels look on in absolute awe. And I don't, does that one ring a bell for you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it does, but the same way.
Yeah.
It does for you right now. The
Okay, here
angels
it
long
is.
to see.
It's actually
Yeah.
First Peter.
First Peter, yeah, they long to see. It's the same word. It's epithemio.
Epithemio.
Yeah.
So it says this in verse 12. It was revealed to them, the people who were preaching and teaching about Jesus. It was revealed to them that they were serving not only themselves, but you in the things that have now been announced to you through those who preached good news to you by the Holy Spirit sent from heaven, things into which angels long to look.
Yeah.
And there's this picture of the goodness of the gospel and redemption. I think that's what Peter is getting at here. Redemption, that the angels go, oh, the grace of God on display is unbelievable. Because we don't see that as operative in our world as they do in theirs. So we know that hell was created for the devil and his angels because there is no redemption for them. That's Matthew chapter 25. I want to say it's somewhere in between verse 41 and 46. And so we know that that's the reason that God created hell. It was for the devil and his angels, because there is, I would argue, there's no redemption for them.
Yeah.
So they change their mind? I don't think so.
Okay. But they could at one point or something like that, right? I mean, apparently
they did.
They
change
did.
their mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, it's at some level they had some sort of choice.
Yeah.
And and maybe
what do you think?
Maybe it's something.
How would you answer it?
Well, maybe that's something like salvation in a sense. Okay, that you become a slave to sin if you're not, or we're born in a sense, or we are slaves to sin before Christ, right? So you can't not sin is kind of the idea. Now, with those who choose Christ, are freed from that and can actually, that's where freedom is in Christ, right? So they actually have the freedom to choose where you really don't if you're not, right? And so it seems as if at some point there was this choice, and the ones that didn't choose God, didn't choose his grace, didn't choose his love, whatever, kind of kept going down this path that became for them irreversible.
Right.
Because and that's just the way it works for a lot of people, sadly, is that they get stuck in that.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're missing some people here. Gwen has joined us online. She just says the seminar was great. And this actually is a good segue that Gwen has into our next question. She says this: you listed sin, sexual sin, drug abuse, abuse one suffers, occult activity, generational sins, aka breaking ground, is what she said. Now, okay, actually, at first I thought that was a question, and it's not a question,
right?
But it does lead to a question that I think at least relates to the to how we handle this in real life. In fact, so here's the question, and I'll get this up on the screen.
While you're
go ahead.
pulling that up, Isaiah 14 is one of the passages.
Is Isaiah 14.
So.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
It is Isaiah 14, and then it's Ezekiel something. So here's the question that I am going to put up on the screen here. It has to do with how we live this out. In fact, at our growth track, there's a number of people that are going through a marriage class as well. Okay, so they meet as a marriage class on every other week, and they joined us. And so they're asking us, what advice would you have in regards to spiritual warfare in engagement and leading into marriage? So You know,
that's a great,
yeah, right.
that's a great question. I have a hypothesis,
Okay.
and this isn't necessarily just like chapter and verse on this, but I think at transition points in our life, the enemy knows we're vulnerable and susceptible to attack. And so I would say that one, to be aware that while you're entering into a new season that is going to be beautiful and great, it's also going to be really challenging, and you're going to be vulnerable to the enemy's attack. So I think to just know that, number one. Number two, and this is a big thing, and I would say whether you're a Jesus follower or not, this should be a part of what you do in premarital. But the enemy seems to operate best in the pockets of secrecy in our lives. And so I think part of your premarital counseling should be, and your premarital journey together should be talking about the things in your life that you'd love to keep hidden, you know, whether it's a past decisions you made, things that have happened to you, things that have gone on in your life, that those, as you keep those hidden in marriage, those can be areas where the enemy just finds a foothold and starts to attack. So those would be the two things that uniquely I would say to those who are in premarital. Number one, just know that in seasons of transition, the enemy attacks. And number two, that if there are things that you're still keeping hidden, bring them out into the open. Jesus heals through our honesty, and there's great grace and power that can work in that.
That's really good. That's really good. I think, that seasons of transition is, and that definitely rings true. I want to say the things in life that cause stress, which actually, anyone getting married, that's one of those big changes. It causes stress. It does. And now it leads to great things. It's not, I mean, it's one of those things we're glad you're doing it. It's the great kind of stress that molds you into something new and better. But there's a lot of those things, changes of job, right? And changes in, I mean, losing a loved one. Oh my goodness. These are times when it's like we're weak, and we can be spiritually weak. Yeah.
I said there's no chapter and verse on it, but maybe there is, Josh. Maybe that's what, when Peter's writing, maybe he says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. And if you look at the way that lions look and lions hunt, they oftentimes try to hunt the vulnerable. They try to hunt the weak that are at the back of the pack, get them alone. And I think that could be one of the ways that we see that play out in very real life, that transition seasons are seasons of vulnerability.
It's good, but a couple that can open up to each other, like you're saying, and really share, then they're not alone in that.
Right.
And then they can be together. And that's the Ecclesiastes, the chord of
totally
together of three, including God in that, right? That can be so much stronger.
Absolutely.
That's really good. Okay. I want to get into a topic that this is the one that kind of touched on a second ago, but we've got a number of questions that are related to this.
Okay.
And it has to do with the danger of dealing with demons. And so this is how it was put, and this was the most liked of them. Should we not deliver people of demonic oppression until they've put their faith in Jesus, based on the strong man example?
Yeah, I would say correct. What is that? Is that Matthew 12? That's the strangest, one of the strangest passages in the New Testament. It's like arid land and water, and you're like, wait, what just happened? This is one of those texts where you just know there's more going on than you know, and you're left to scratch your head a little bit. Let me just read it for you. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places, obviously, seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came. Now, this is my house. This is like when I'm talking about ownership. This is the idea,
This
right?
is possession.
And
Okay.
when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and brings with it seven other spirits more evil than itself, and they will enter and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first.
Okay.
So there you have it. Well, here's what I would say. No, that you should not try to drive out a demon from a person who is not a follower of Jesus. One, they need to agree that they don't want this to be a part of their life.
Okay.
And the only thing that will, as this passage, I was going to say parable. It's not a parable. It's this teaching from Jesus says that if the house is empty, like if Jesus isn't Lord, then it will be worse off the second time around than it was the first time. And so it sounds weird, but the first thing to do is to lead this person to faith in Christ before you drive out the demon, to have them declare Christ is Lord. He is my savior. I want him to abide in me. And so that's the first step in deliverance.
Yeah. And that's why this is the question. This is why you said, I mean, the question said is that you said something about not being able to cast out a demon for someone, but you do it with the person.
Yeah.
So that's what you're getting at here, right?
Yeah. There needs to be an agreement that in order for it to be successful on the long term, that's what I would say. You may see a short-term turnaround, but long-term, and I think that's what Matthew 12 is saying, is it's going to be worse off long-term.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as this questioner is asking, I mean, we basically are saying we could cause greater harm if we expel a demon for someone who hasn't trusted Jesus. And it could cause worse things for them.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I would agree with that statement.
Okay. Now there is an example. I want to say this is Mark 9, where the disciples can't cast out a demon.
Right.
It actually happens in a few places. And in one place, Jesus says this can only be done by prayer and fasting. And then another, he says it can only be done by prayer. The question is, are we to be careful in some situations? Now, I think you just said we need to be careful in all situations.
Yeah.
But something weird is going on here.
Very strange.
Very strange.
No, so here's what I would say. I think this goes back to a point that I made during the seminar that said, where I said that our power flows through intimacy.
Okay.
And that we don't have power independent of God. We have power in dependence on God. And
good.
So yeah, I like the way that flowed.
That's really good. You should write that down.
And this idea at least comes from Rob Reimer's book, Spiritual Authority, where he has a whole section in that book on that very text. And what he says is really what Jesus is saying isn't like, come on, guys, you need to pray more or you need to fast before you try to drive out these kinds of demons. What he's saying is there's an authority that builds through intimacy that builds no other way. And you need to cultivate that place, that intimacy with your Father, and abiding in the Spirit so that you're staying in step with him when you encounter some of this demonic activity.
Yeah.
But notice, isn't it fascinating? I mean, I'm just thinking about this right now. Like there's some demons where like a certain level of intimacy with God is enough. Right.
Yes.
And that's where this idea of like a hierarchy comes in, and
stronger.
that some demons are more powerful or even more evil. Like, did you catch that in Matthew 12? It's like he'll bring back 7 more spirits that are even more evil. It's like I felt like you were either evil or you weren't, but evidently there's a scale of evil. There's a power hierarchy within the demonic world, or the demonic realm. And so it's a really interesting idea. But all that to say, I think that what Jesus is saying is that the power, you need certain levels of power to interact with and drive out, as it were, some demons, and that power and authority flows through intimacy with the Father.
Yeah, that's great. They I mean, here and so Luke 9 is that passage, the after the transfiguration. There's they see, here's the thing. They don't have they're trying to do this the same way that as if by their own power is what you're getting at, by their own strength, without being reliant on the Spirit, right? They don't have the Spirit yet, right? I mean, there's this in this place where they're just trying to go through the actions. And here Jesus comes in the full power of the Spirit.
Well, they've seen Jesus do it.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
This is how it works. And it's not, I think that would be one of the main things that I would say is this is not mechanical. This isn't about following the right steps. It is deeply spiritual.
Yeah.
And that's Jesus's point and I know we go spiritual warfare, but still in our Western minds, we want to systematize it and make it, okay, if you follow these SOPs, then certainly you'll be able to drive out. And I think what Jesus is saying is, no, this happens through intimacy with me, not independent of it.
Yeah. And Michael Lyons, he actually pointed out before, I think we got to it, that does indicate that there are some demons that are more evil and or more powerful than others, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
Correct.
So C.S. Lewis was right. They have a whole training program. No,
maybe they do.
Maybe they do. Well, I'm sure that's kind of what.
So tell your references to.
So references to one of the best books. I think you mentioned it as one of the best books. It's called the Screwtape Letters, and these are letters of the demon. A pretend demon, obviously, that C.S. Lewis was writing. And by the way, C.S. Lewis hated writing that book.
Did he?
He really hated it. And I think he hated it because he was really good at it. And he realized. So what he had to do, what C.S. Lewis does is he writes as if he is the demon, writing to a younger demon named Wormwood. And so Screwtape is the elder demon, presumably more powerful demon that had been around longer. He's mentoring a younger demon. And it is fascinating. Oh my goodness. All the references to the enemy is a reference to God. And so it is amazing. He was really, really good at writing that.
He was.
And that's why
it's brilliant.
It's brilliant so much. Oh man. Well, that's really good. So okay, let's I think it's time to move on to some of our practices today. Okay, because we did this specifically because Halloween is coming.
Yes, it is.
All right. And so Halloween's a holiday that's mixed with all sorts of rituals that, have past or some connection to at least some pagan practices. It's not the only holiday we celebrate with some of those references. Yes, indeed. More on that later. But the question is, has to do with all those practices. So, see if I can get this up here. Okay, what about? Nope, that's not the right question. Here it is. There it is. There. What impact do you think New Age pagan practices such as crystal healing, tarot cards, and astrology? In fact, we can throw in Halloween here, even, right? What does this have on spiritual warfare? What kind of impact do they have, do you think?
Major impact, I would say. And how to quantify it, I'm not sure. So I will qualify it with, I had the chance on a few different occasions to go to like New Orleans, for example, they're way into tarot card reading, New Age, occult, etc. And there's just a sense of spiritual oppression there. Met somebody in one of our services, this was 2 months ago, maybe, who is from Haiti, and talked about curses that had been put on he and his family, and breaking free from those in Jesus. And the testimony that he had was just unbelievable, right? Of God's work in his life. And so I would just simply say that, and there's all throughout the Old Testament, there's things about spiritists and occult and that. But I would just simply say that there is validity to that I'll go back to where I started our spiritual warfare seminar, is that we live in a world that's just not just physical. Physical is not the only thing that's real, and that those things do have spiritual power behind them. And that's why oftentimes they quote unquote work, right? Like you go to a fortune teller or whatever, a psychic,
yeah,
a psychic, and sometimes they're powerful and right.
Totally,
I've heard,
totally.
right? So,
and even in the Bible, there's plenty of instances where they actually do something.
yeah,
They actually work. They could copy some of the plagues.
yeah. No, absolutely. That's real, but the goal is not for that demon to build up a life in a positive way. It's to get into a life through offering something that we long for, right? And want control over the future, knowledge about the future, etc. So if the demonic activity can get in that way, then it can start to torment and demonize and execute on its real goal, which is not to tell you your future. It's to destroy your future. We know that very clearly, according to the words of Jesus. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but he says, I've come that you may have life and have it to the full. I think all of those things on the surface can look good, and even offer some quote unquote good initially. But like I said, their goal is to get into your life, not to tell you your future, but to destroy your future.
Wow. And if it means that they give you a little bit
Totally
of future to get in there.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow. That's
tarot card, astrological sign, whatever.
Okay.
Right.
So now,
whatever.
Now, and I mentioned Halloween, so there is a question about this because this is a unique one. But so what is the difference? Someone says in celebration of Halloween and the harvest celebration. Okay. So now, for those who, I don't know, I've just noticed this, but haven't really thought it through necessarily. Churches tend to do this thing around Halloween. We call them harvest festivals or harvest parties. And oftentimes they don't want to use the word Halloween because of the very real issues that you're talking about, that there's an association with some practices of evil and things like that, that has been made. How much of that is true or not, we don't, that's interesting. What would you say about this?
Well, okay, I'll say a few different things.
Yeah.
Number one, when I lived in Colorado, like I said, I don't have a plethora of firsthand experience with the demonic and with things like this, but I do try to surround myself with people who tend to operate in these spaces. And because I want to be a well-rounded follower of Jesus, and I believe that this is a very real part of our spiritual journey.
There you go.
And so in Colorado, I had a friend of mine who was like to the nth degree prophetic. And he would say, he said, Halloween night is crazy from a spiritual standpoint. He said, there is tons of demonic activity that happens on Halloween. Wow. Now, you can take that for what it's worth. But anytime we're lifting up, things like ghosts and goblins and devils and, etc. Anytime those are being celebrated, you could imagine that the powers of the kingdom of darkness, according to the New Testament, celebrates that, right? So, one, I think you can, now, is that what Halloween on a whole is doing? I don't know that that's the intent of Halloween. And I do think that Christians have a long and illustrious history of taking pagan holidays and poaching them and making them their own. Right. We'll talk about Christmas and the way that happened, even Ishtar, right? Okay. So, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. I actually think it's winsome in some ways. And so I think the question for followers of Jesus can be, how can I utilize this holiday that our enemy loves, but how could I utilize it for good? Right. Can I use this as a chance to interact with neighbors who I don't see for the rest of the year, and maybe like start some friendships? Is it a way for me to offer kindness to people? Is the Holy Spirit challenging me to make a stand about it? I don't know. I'm not telling you exactly what to do, but I don't think that we need to write it off. And, celebrating harvest is a very biblical thing anyway. The fact that we do it right next to Halloween, we'll talk about why we celebrate Christmas when we do.
Yes, so that's right.
We can withhold judgment until we put up our Christmas tree and all that.
Okay. Interesting thing about that. is that actually this is one where this was a Christian holiday that got taken over in a sense by the pagans. I mean, because All Hallows Eve is Saints Day is November 1st. Okay, All Saints Day. Yep. And so they kind of Reformation Day also is what they
stream you're in.
So it had some sort of, I don't know the history of All Saints Day or anything like that, but they assumed that the night before, that all the saints would come out, right? And then this comes out a lot in Días de la Muerte, and kind of Latino customs, but it's the night before, the eve of all that, and so it was as if they took something that was good and sure enough made it bad. Now, about 10 years ago here at the church, we actually made an intentional decision to move our harvest party off of Halloween. It used to always be on the 31st. It would kind of compete with that, but what we decided was, that's the one night where people want to come over to your house. And so as Christians, we should probably be there where people are in the neighborhood and experiencing things. And I think it was a great move.
Yeah. So I like it.
Trying to redeem that one.
Yep.
All right, man. Well, okay, we got to get moving. So I think the last question I can ask is, ¿Cómo se están parando? Okay, I don't want to try to do that. This was one of the questions that came in because I love this, and I'm so glad I say that. I wish I could say it better. One of our values in Growth Track is that it is an inter-ethnic experience, and so we had our Spanish language brothers and sisters with us joining in, and so this question,
Savon was doing a live translation.
Word, he was translating some of these concepts that are super intense. Like that guy is amazing. Way to go, Stefan. But so basically the question is, how are we going to teach this to our kids, to youth? How should we?
I think the way that you teach anything well is by modeling it, and living it out first. So there's certainly the objective part that we do need to teach, but I think there's an invitation from Jesus that he's inviting us to step into this a little bit in a little bit different way, maybe at least for me, than I had previously. And I think the way that we teach our kids is by living it out and modeling it.
There you go. I think what you're trying to do, and this is the thing that hit me at the seminar, and I think I tried to say it this way at the end, was that you're tackling something we don't often talk about, because I think there's streams of in the church that kind of ignore spiritual warfare, and then there's streams that might focus on it too much. Okay,
now sure.
And this is what you're saying of trying to be around all sorts of different people, right? And not to pick on any of them, but what we're saying is that this is real. It's a reality. So we do need to talk about it with the newer generations, younger generations, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Ryan, we got to most of these questions.
We did,
we did. But before we go, man, love to say a few words about the sermon. But I think that the book that you brought is probably a better time to do this now.
It is.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, Ryan brought a book. Now, I'm glad you brought this book, but I have to point out, you might have brought this book before, but this is an appropriate time.
I brought it?
Maybe just between us. So maybe not. Maybe
I did.
Maybe you did, but that's all right. This is worth bringing because this book speaks would go into more depth of what you were talking about.
So if you're interested in the talk about the Elohim and lowercase g gods in the Old Testament,
regional
divine counsel of God. If you went, wait, God has a divine counsel, things like that, questions like that. Michael Heiser's work, Unseen Realm, is fascinating. I would say there's some things I read where I went, I'm not sure I would interpret it that way, or I'm not sure I'm with you on that, Michael. But all of it was interesting and it was mind-blowing.
And none of it was like, no, that's absolutely wrong.
No.
Right? It was like,
Some of it was like, how did I get through seminary and not hear anybody ever talk about this perspective before?
That's true.
Right? I don't know if you felt like that.
Absolutely.
I read it and went, what? well,
Yeah.
you're right. That's there. Why
Uh-huh.
haven't I seen that before?
Uh-huh.
And why haven't we talked about it?
Yeah, he launches out of Psalm 82, right?
82.
Yeah, that mentions the phrase Elohim twice,
Mm-hmm.
but it said, but we, and the right way to translate that is that God is the God above all gods, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
the
that's
reference?
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so here in this passage, we've got God listed as our God. We would say Yahweh. The personal name is above all gods. So
Mhm.
it's right there. It's not like it's been hiding.
No, but in different translations it has.
Oh, is that right?
In English translations,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, that's
it's
right.
been because we don't know what to do with that,
We don't.
right? We don't know what to do with that. So the way
Yeah,
that some of our English translations read, it
that's right.
doesn't read like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's one way to get rid of a problem.
There you go, done.
To translate it out. No, that's one of the things I love about this is being able to dive into that. So once again, that was The Unseen Realm by Michael Heisner. And
no N. Heiser.
oh, excuse me, Heiser. You're right. It just seems like it should say Heisner.
Does.
Michael, come on. Just kidding.
On,
okay. Now we've gone almost an hour. But this was a monumentous week. You actually so you did that seminar and closed out a series. That was a busy week.
It was a busy week. Yeah.
It was a busy week. And I thought that the close to this series was just the right tone, that all of the things that describe who we are, right, is all these things that that really are all pointing to this last one.
Right.
That this is us. We are servants. Right?
Yeah. And I love the picture that Jesus gave his disciples of that through the washing of the feet. And it's always a challenge and a little bit of a risk to choose to preach on a passage that people know quite well. But I really felt like, this is the picture. This is the picture that Jesus gave his disciples before the ultimate picture of the cross, but of his love on display.
Yeah.
So that's what we talked about. And yeah.
No, I thought it was great. In a time when in a time in our world where time in our church, definitely, where we need more and more people to be recognizing their call to be servants, in a sense, to be joining back in. We've kind of all taken a little bit of a break.
Yeah,
so it would seem.
It's true.
Now, obviously not intentional. No one said, "Hey, I want to take a break for a year." And yet I realize there's been some people that have gotten pretty comfortable in that. They've stayed home. I've got friends who've done this, who have stayed home, who've decided, yeah, it's actually just a lot better going to church in my pajamas.
Yes.
Which, don't get me wrong,
doesn't sound bad.
I understand. I understand that. And yet, it's hard to be much of a servant.
And I think too, Jesus would say, gosh, it's hard to be a disciple if you're not a servant.
Yes.
Not actually, he probably wouldn't. He'd probably say it's not hard, it's impossible.
Yeah.
If we're going to live in his way with his heart, serving is a non-negotiable.
That's right.
And, I think one of the things that, and we're out of time, but one of the things I wish I'd had more time to push into is, I think in our current generation, there's this idea where I need to be totally passionate about something if I'm going to serve. Right. And it's got to align perfectly with my gifts. And, my attempt at the very end was to say God does want you to find places like that, because there is a place where the world's sadness and your passion and gifting meet, right? Pain, where the world's pain and your passion meet. But sometimes there's just stuff that needs to get done.
That's right.
And very few people are passionate about the dishes.
That's right.
But they need to get done every night,
Yeah, and the mundane.
Yeah. And so that was one of the things that I really wanted to encourage our church body on was, hey, let's be people who search for areas where we're gifting that align with our strength finders or our Enneagram number, right? And it's like, yes.
Yeah.
But then let's also be people who go, gosh, if there's a need, I'm there.
That's right. That's right. And let me be clear. I just said something that I'm going to correct myself. Some people are home because they're serving.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So we know people. I know people that are, maybe even watching this right now, that are home taking care of loved ones who can't go out, and they didn't choose that.
Yeah.
To them, this isn't like in the area of their giftedness, right? It's not the thing, but they're doing it. And,
absolutely.
And
so, there's some who need to because of health concerns and
all that stuff. But same time, this was a good challenge. I was struck by this whole series. We didn't go into this much, but this is us. In each of those things, I realized that this is us because of who God is.
Yeah.
In each of those things that we said, we are who we are, trying to be the church we are, because this is a reflection of who God is. And so I thought it was a great series, challenging for us, and I'm hoping it's one that we go back to, that we think about often.
I'm here.
Oh, good. Siri's here, by the way.
Series and Siri.
And Siri. Oh, I said series.
Very similar.
Okay. Yep.
That's it.
Thank you. That's all we have. All right, everybody. Well, we look forward to joining you next week on a not so known passage.
That's right.
We'll be talking about Philemon. So, everybody, so good to be with you. We will see you soon. God bless everybody.
God bless.